With the draft behind them, this team is on to preparing for the 2026 season, and a lot of that's going to revolve around Andy Reid and whether or not he can rectify many of the mistakes he made last season en route to a 6-11 record, his worst in Kansas City. We're going to be discussing the future of coach, what he's doing to turn this team around, and whether or not history is even on his side. All of that and more today on Chiefs Coast Bias. What's up, Chiefs nerds? Welcome to another episode of Chiefs Coast Bias with your host, me, Malgore. Today we're going to do a little bit of a reading series and use it as a jumping off point to discussing Andy Reid and his future coaching the Kansas City Chiefs. I've talked about this in several other videos that really fans need to be thinking about a very limited window with Coach Reid because of his age and because of the history of the NFL. But there's a recent article in ESPN from about 3 weeks ago from Nate Taylor that kind of did a deep dive into what the thinking is of Andy Reid and the coaching staff and what we can maybe expect from this team going forward. Some acknowledgement that a lot of mistakes were made in the 2025 season, and some acknowledgement that changes must be made in order to prevent a repeat of those mistakes. We're going to be looking at this article in detail, and I'll be providing a little bit of my commentary. So for those of you too lazy to read, hey, you came to the right place because I read the article for you. We're going to break it down. We're going to discuss Coach Reid. And with that, let's jump right into it. Name of the article is Can Andy Reid Reinvent Himself and Right the Chiefs by Nate Taylor over at ESPN.com. And to me, it was very insightful in sort of saying what the mentality of the coach is and the coaching staff, what they think went wrong last season, and what they may be doing to rectify those problems going forward. Now, of course, Andy Reid is not going to go into great detail on what he's going to do to turn the team around, wants to keep a lot of that close to the vest since all of his competitors can easily access this article as well. So you do have to read between the lines a little bit, and we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to leave it up to you to decide whether or not what I'm reading into it is reasonable or not. But I'm going to be giving you some select clips from it. Let's jump right in and start with the first one. It says, quote, "You have time, a chance to step back and look at things a little bit different. There's some good to that, but you don't want to be in that position." And I like this from the start because it's just an acknowledgement that last year was not a fluke. Now, it doesn't mean that Andy Reid and the coaching staff think that this team is truly 6-11 and they're that far away. I mean, they were only a year removed from a Super Bowl appearance, but it is an acknowledgement that it wasn't just sort of a regression to the mean, which is an idea we're going to talk about a little bit more later. It's an acknowledgement that there were some real problems on this team and that changes need to be made. You can't just run it back and think, well, things are going to bounce back and go the other way. Next quote says, "Reid is facing a critical year ahead of him. Reid has quite the objective. Can he, as the NFL's oldest coach at 68, reignite the Chiefs' offense both as a leader and as a play caller?" Yes, very apt quote, because we're going to be talking, and I think the NFL is going to be talking a lot now about Andy Reid's age, because he's hit a point in his career where historically not many coaches succeed. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we look at this third clip. Many have wondered how much Reid will change. Veach believes that the coach's intentions and actions, which have already begun, won't be too radical. The proof for Reid will be if the collection of small changes he has made, replacing coaching, enhancing the run game, developing young players, will lead to the team returning to the top of the NFL standings. Only one coach in the Super Bowl era who is as old as Reid is right now, Bruce Arians, was 68 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, has led his team to the Lombardi Trophy. There are far more coaching legends, 6 in the past, who missed the playoffs, 13 out of 22 possible seasons with a coach at that age, than those who led their team to its respective conference championship game, which has only happened twice, once with Arians and once with Marv Levy. It's very similar to a lot of the discussions we get in the NFL when we talk about magic ages for different positions. Probably the one that jumps out to most people is the running back hitting the age of 30. And we always think to ourselves, well, there can't be that much of a physical degradation between age 29 and age 30 necessarily. And we see some players that can play effectively beyond that. But over time, we do notice that there are certain age points in the NFL where it's very uncommon for a player to continue to achieve or produce at the high levels that they did earlier on in their career. And this data is pointing us to the same phenomenon happening with Andy Reid, who is 68 now. The first part of this clip is interesting to me because it kind of asks the broader question: can you change? Are you willing to change? Because we see kind of both sides of it being played out, where Andy Reid is acknowledging changes need to be made, but even Brett Veach is saying that they aren't going to be radical changes. They're just going to be tweaks. It's hard to argue with that approach when you're talking about a coach who's taken the Kansas City Chiefs to 5 Super Bowls, including 3 in a row, the last one culminating just a year ago. It's hard to say you need radical changes in your approach to the offseason or your approach to offensive game planning. So I do like the balance that they're playing there, but you have to wonder is, are the changes going to be enough? There's a wide space between a minor change and a radical change that might still be necessary to be a little bit more than just a minor tweak in order to get the team there. And you always have to ask yourself, with a coach as cerebral and experienced as Andy Reid, is he just saying the right things? Coaches are very aware of media presence. They're very aware of what and how their answers are going to be received for the most part, which is why Andy Reid is one of the best at being very vague, at being very monotone, always upbeat, always supportive, always personally taking the blame. But you have to ask yourself, is he just saying the right things, or is this showing a sincere desire to make the kinds of changes needed to catapult the team back into the Super Bowl conversation? There's a few reasons I think we could talk about for why older coaches don't succeed in the NFL nearly as much, even if they are legendary coaches, as it points out in this quote. And one is just the energy and the commitment. And honestly, even if the commitment is there, the energy is going to dictate that. This is not a 9 to 5 job. This is what many coaches report as being sort of a, you are there 14 to 15 hours a day grinding away on film. You have so few games, and the quality of competition is so great in the NFL that every coach acknowledges that even the smallest advantage on a single play or a single correct call can change the course of the game and be the difference between something like getting home field advantage in the playoffs and getting a wild card. We've seen those kinds of scenarios play out in the NFL. So you have to have that energy level. So even if the commitment is there, there's always a chance that just at a certain age, it's impossible physically and mentally for a coach to keep up at that pace. You also have to ask yourself, if you're someone who's been coaching 30 plus years in the NFL, does that mean that they've sort of progress their aging at an even faster pace because they've been going at that grind all throughout their 30s, 40s, 50s, their entire adult lives? Does that mean that even their 68, they're going to be suffering from a little bit more setbacks in terms of health implications, energy, etc.? And let's be honest, you don't want to make assumptions about people's personal health, but you look at Andy Reid, he's a big guy. His favorite food at the age of 68 still appears to be a cheeseburger. So there are certainly questions about that as well. Another aspect that I think really does come into play with aging is whether or not players respond. I myself in my 40s, and even I have already sort of understood, and I recall my attitude towards even middle-aged people when I was in my 20s. And the bulk of your players in the NFL are in that range. They're in their 20s. They're mid to late 20s as your average NFL player. Age does make a difference, where when you're young especially, you don't always view age as wisdom and experience. You oftentimes view it as a coach being out of touch. Now, why is this relevant? I think that it means that players have a lower threshold for tuning a coach out once they hit a certain age, where it hits a point where it's very difficult for players to relate to that coach, or when times get tough, as all teams go through tough times, the players are quicker to dismiss that coach by sort of using it as an excuse. Like, well, the reason that we're making these bad calls or we're doing poorly here is because coach is obviously old and out of touch. I do think that's a dynamic that happens. Obviously, Andy Reid has the credibility to mitigate this. He seems to be a real players coach, have a very positive father-like relationship with many of his players, and he has the credibility of coaching in 6 Super Bowls over the course of his head coaching career, winning 3 of them, taking 2 different franchises to the Super Bowl. And honestly, what I think is going to go down as one of the great achievements in NFL history, this man took Donovan McNabb to the Super Bowl against the New England Patriots and damn near won the game. So Andy Reid certainly has the credibility to mitigate a lot of that. But I think back to a recent example of Pete Carroll, who was also a players coach, who also had long-term sustained success at multiple levels, college championships and a Super Bowl. and it still seems like he kind of lost his team at the end. So it can come quickly, and it can almost come out of nowhere that when times get tough, the players are more willing to tune that coach out. That's another reason that I like the first quote we looked at, that this is kind of a pivotal year. One time going 6-11 with your quarterback blowing his knee out and you're in every game, you're competitive at the end. That looks like one thing. 2 seasons in a row starts to look like a trend, and it certainly increases the chance that players may stop responding to coaching or try to just sort of tune out the coach as being like, well, it's not us, it's the coach. They're old, they're out of touch, etc. I don't think that that is what will happen, but I think it is a reasonable explanation of why an older coach sometimes fades away despite how much success they've had, because so much of coaching is getting players to focus 100% of the time, getting players to execute 100% of the time, and you need their commitment and their buy-in, and they have to believe with all of their body, literally with all of their body, to being willing to put it on the line, believe that the choices that you're making are in their best interests. I think it's a relevant thing that to say that Andy Reid's at 68, and even if he is an effective coach, you're talking about 68. That's retirement age for most people, and this is certainly a more demanding job than your average American has, not only in terms of the physical demands because of the long work days, the mental demands because of the focus it requires at all times, but also the mental pressure, the pressure of a multi-billion-dollar franchise relying on your decisions, your players relying on their careers continuing and them getting paid based on largely on the quality of your coaching and the results that you can bring. That kind of mental pressure can certainly wear on someone over a long time. Let's look at the next clip where they're going to start talking about some of the 2025 issues. It says a number of small issues within the team over the past few years had compounded. The Chiefs still had the talent to win games last season. They ranked 6th in points allowed per game. I've said multiple times, I think people are a little too down on the defense, that it was really very specific parts of the defense that need to be improved. But the overall picture of the defense wasn't bad, because at the end of the day, they have to keep points off the board, and they were pretty good at that. But they fell in key moments in close games. They went 1-9 in one-score games. Fatigue wasn't all physical. I think a lot of it was probably mental. Reid made odd decisions too, and we're going to get into those separately. But let's talk a little bit about the close games thing. One, I think we can say that a lot of it is about discipline. I just talked about how you have to have focus at all times. You have to believe. You have to be executing on every play. This is a team that played a lot of extra games. They were coming off of 3 Super Bowl seasons in a row, and every season prior to that, they had been 1 game short of the Super Bowl or in the Super Bowl. So a lot of the players that have been on the team 4, 5, 6 years, they had played almost an entire extra season's worth of games. That absolutely wears on you in terms of maintaining your focus. So I do think discipline was part of the issue. We've talked a little bit about coaching, that maybe there was not enough dissent of Andy Reid to coaches were maybe becoming a little complacent. We discussed this a lot if you watch my video on the return of Eric Bieniemy and how and whether or not he's going to be able to change the team. Big part of that narrative was discipline and accountability. Last thing I want to talk about in terms of the close games, though, and diagnosing how they happen, is this concept of regression to the mean, because this one really annoys me. I see a lot of people writing off last season and even the season before that by just sort of saying like, oh, well, it's regression to the mean. You can't sustain that super high win percentage in close games. Of course, they were going to get a streak the other way to sort of bring it back down to its average. No, that is not how averages work. Think about the game of roulette. When it shows the board, it shows when it's been red, when it's been black. A lot of people mistakenly bet off of that. But if you think of roulette, you can get streaks like that over 100 spins where, maybe Chiefs had a 1-9 record in one-score games. So think about roulette. Maybe over 10 spins, 9 times it comes up black, only 1 time it comes up red. That can absolutely happen in roulette. But this is over the course of hundreds, if not thousands of spins that those streaks can manifest. When you're talking about the NFL, you're only talking about 17 spins in a given season. If we just talk about regular season, the odds of hitting a streak of 9 on one side, 1 on the other, with just a 17 game sample size, the odds are incredibly low. And the same goes for the season before that, hitting it the other way. Let's say it came up red most of the time, almost every time. The odds of hitting that streak on a 17 game sample size are very low. Usually, when we think of regressing to the mean, we're talking about very large sample sizes, not the kinds of sample sizes we deal with in the NFL. So I've never liked that narrative of it was all just regression to the mean. I think that it is giving too much of a pass to the 2025 team in saying, like, look, there were problems with this team that made them lose consistent games. It was not just the toss of the ball or the bounce of the ball. And I think it shortchanges the 2024 team, who was really good at winning one score games. So you're not going to hear me talk about that regression to the mean. Do I think it exists at the margins? Absolutely. I don't think it exists to the point where you can say, like, oh, you're winning 90% one year and then the next year you're going to lose 90%. That's not how averages work when you're talking about small sample sizes. So let's get into a little bit of some of the specifics that the article mentions on different things that happened in 2025 that led to the Kansas City Chiefs' bad 6-11 season. Reid made odd decisions too. On Thanksgiving, he elected to punt against the Dallas Cowboys when the offense was on the opponent's side of the field. And that is an odd decision to me because historically, and especially with Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid's had supreme confidence in the offense. I don't like the narratives about how Andy Reid used to be a bad decision maker and now he's a great one. To me, so much of that is the quarterback. It's easy to be a really good decision maker when you have Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback, someone that can get you chunk plays of 20, 40 yards on any given down. So I think his decision making has always been relatively consistent. What I like about this quote, though, and the next one you're going to see, is it's actually talking about how odd these decisions were in the context of Andy Reid's coaching career. So the next clip says, in the loss to Houston, Reid kept the offense, which struggled that night, on the field for a 4th and 1 from its own 31-yard line with 10 minutes remaining and the score tied. Reid had never made such a decision before in his 27-year career. This is a bit of a double-edged sword because on the one hand, I'm like, hey, it's good that Andy Reid's willing to, branch out and try new things that late in his career. He's been coaching almost 30 years. Then you look at it and say, well, but the thing that he tried didn't really make any sense. So a lot of us have been talking about, was it play calling or was it scheme? And I think a lot of it was probably a little bit of both. One of the things that worried me about the 2026 draft is we didn't do much to address the offense. And a big problem that the Kansas City Chiefs had over the course of the season was that in the scheme they had, the players were not getting open, which means if you're largely keeping the same base of offensive players, one of two things need to happen this season. Either the players need to get better or the scheme needs to change to adapt to the skills of the players to put them in better positions to win. And I'm very interested to see what Andy Reid's thinking is on that. And what it looks like when they get out on the field. Next quote, watching film of the offense last season often left many analysts asking whether or not they were overthinking things on that side of the ball. That's a narrative a lot of us fans have had over the years, is that we always like to say Andy Reid gets too cute, and we absolutely saw that. This game that it's talking about now is, I think, the most frustrating game, and I remember texting one of my friends. We text a lot during every Chiefs game, and I remember how dejected I was when I was just like, well, this is the game that showed me that this team's just not good enough. It was the Denver game. Two examples of Reid's curious play calling occurred in a November loss to Denver. On 2nd and 10 from their 26-yard line, with the score tied, the Chiefs had 3 tight ends on the field, with Rashee Rice at running back and Hunt lined up as the lone receiver. When Mahomes finished his drop back, none of his receiving options were open. Following an incompletion on the following play, none of Mahomes' 3 receiving options, Kelsey, Thornton, Worthy, were open on the left side of the field. The Chiefs punted on the next play, never got the ball back, and lost on a field goal as time expired. You'll remember what was so dejecting about that game is that twice the offense got the ball in the fourth quarter, once with a 3-point lead where a touchdown drive seals the game, but even a clock-consuming field goal drive makes the win percentage go through the roof for Kansas City. 3-and-out punt. Then the Chiefs get the ball back after the defense only gives up a field goal to Denver. So now we're looking at a tie game. 3-and-out punt. That was one of the low points for me in the regular season as a Chiefs fan. There was only one other time that I ever saw Mahomes' sort of mortality let us down, and that was the 2021 AFC Championship game when the Chiefs had that, I believe, 21-3 lead at halftime that was blown, and it was purely because The offense just could not get it done. And, the defense could have played better, but in the end, really, the offense only needed to generate a touchdown in the second half to seal the game, and they were unable to do so. The other time that I was dejected was that Denver game, because you think when Mahomes is getting the ball in the fourth quarter with a chance to put it away, it's going to happen. You think if he gets that ball twice with a chance to put it away, that it's really going to happen. And neither one did it. And Andy Reid kind of failed to do on that play the thing that he's always told us that he would do.
We're going to try to tickle your tonsils.
And it just didn't happen there. So I think that was an instance of Andy Reid getting too cute with the formations. And I also think it was just a limitation of the talent. And a lot of times I ask myself when we see those cute plays, is that Andy Reid acknowledging a limitation of the talent? His belief that he can use scheme to get them open? Is the personnel too specialized? Do we have too many players that are great at one thing, and the Chiefs attempt to spam that thing over and over again, and teams eventually catch on? These are all realistic questions for me. And I think that bringing in Eric Bieniemy is certainly a sign that the Chiefs are willing to make some changes, that they seem to have made a concerted effort to refocus on the run game, at least Veach has in terms of the personnel. I don't think this is ever going to be a team that runs more than about 45% of the time, but even that would be pretty good for Kansas City, especially if the running game is at least effective to open other things up. So we had a lot of odd play calling. We had a lot of personnel that was too specialized. We had really weird packages in crucial moments. And the draft seems to indicate to me that Andy Reid is confident, and this is what he is staking the 26th season on, that the tweaks don't need to be major, that the talent is on this offense, except for running back. That was the one place they sought to infuse a lot of new talent, but that outside of the running back position, Andy Reid is confident in the abilities of this offense. And we've talked in the past about how there's some advanced statistics like EPA last year that sort of point to that possibility. And I think that's going to be something that is intriguing to look at going forward, as to just whether or not Andy Reid is correct in his assessment of that aspect of the team. So, what's the final verdict? Well, I mean, it's a lot of unanswered questions: scheme, play calling, how big are the changes going to be? I do think that Eric Bieniemy is a realistic change, because I think it's an acknowledgement from Andy Reid that he needs dissenting voices in the room, an acknowledgement that the players were not focused, that the execution was not there. But that to me is only half the equation, because it was not just the players' focus and execution. Many times it was also what they were being asked to execute. And that's the part Andy Reid needs to work on. He's made some position coaching changes to indicate that he doesn't think the coaching was good enough last year. That is a good thing. He's definitely said in a direct manner that the running game is going to be a bigger point of emphasis. That is a good thing. And will there come a day when I doubt Andy Reid? Possibly. If we see multiple seasons of poor performance and very questionable decisions. But I think a lot of the questionable decisions that this article talks about can kind of be explained of just being backed into a corner and not necessarily believing in the ability of your players to win on their own one-on-one, and over scheming to make up for that, which is something you can fix in an off season. And he's coached two NFL teams to over 100 wins. I don't think he's going to get to the record in wins, but he's going to get damn close. He's coached two NFL teams to Super Bowls. He has the best quarterback in the NFL. Health wise, even if Andy Reid's on top of his game, I think that we only have maybe 3, if we're lucky, 4 or 5 at absolute most, more years of Andy Reid. I don't know if Andy Reid will be the coach when Kansas City moves into the new stadium here after a while. So the real question for me is, how aware of that is Andy Reid? And I think that he is aware of it. He's such a sharp guy, not just in terms of his football acumen, but Andy Reid to me is a very cerebral coach, in that he knows what makes people tick. He knows how far he can push players, and he knows how to relate to them in a way that keeps them bought in. And he's not that rah rah, high energy guy where when you're losing, you just look like a fool. He's serious at all times. I think he maintains that seriousness that helps your credibility, and that he is able to relate to players. So I have faith that Andy Reid's going to turn it around. Doesn't mean I think the Chiefs are getting back to the Super Bowl. So much of that is going to depend on health, where, starting with your quarterback. And I'm not sure if the team made enough offensive changes to get all the way to the Super Bowl, but I absolutely think that you're going to see this team picking much later in the draft a year from now. And I think you're going to see a double digit win team. So Andy Reid, is he reinvigorated? I think he is. I think that he's recognized the mistakes that he's made and he's doing something to change them. Now, that's not enough. The part that I really have faith in is that he's smart enough to make the right changes with the longevity of his career. And perhaps most importantly, he's welcoming dissenting voices, which leads me to believe that he understands he may not have every answer himself, and the real question is going to be, does he trust the right people? And throughout his career, more often than not, he has shown that he does. But what do you think? I really love this article. I just love Andy Reid. I remember in 2013 when Kansas City brought him in, same friend that I'm always texting during every game. I remember he was over at my house. We were playing games or something. And I just remember asking him, like, how do you think Andy Reid will ever get us to the Super Bowl? And he was really sober minded about it. He's like, well, probably not, but not because Andy Reid's not awesome, just because, not very many people get to the Super Bowl. It's really hard. And I remember saying, and now I feel like a fool because I said, I think he'll get us to one. I don't know if he will win us a Super Bowl. And he's done so much more than that. So cherish your time with Andy Reid, 68 years old. I think he's got a lot of life ahead of him to live, but I don't think he has a lot of years of coaching left in him. So we really need to enjoy this ride while we have Mahomes and Andy Reid. No one in the NFL has ever been able to create something quite like this, and I don't think anyone ever will. So like the video, subscribe to the channel to help me spread the word, make comments to show YouTube that you're engaged. Anything you can do to help me get the word out. I'm just the rarest of creatures on YouTube, which is a bearded white man talking into a camera about football as though he knows what he's talking about. You can't just get that anywhere on YouTube. You got to come to a place with high-minded discourse like Chiefs Coast Bias. So you want to keep us going, show me that support. I hope you all are doing well. I really hope everyone enjoyed the draft and that you're super pumped. I'm waiting for June 1st to roll around. I think that's when the Chiefs are going to make some free agency additions. That'll be one of my next videos coming out. We got mini camps coming up, rookie mini camps. We're going to have OTAs before you know it. I'm Malgore. This is Chiefs Coast Bias, and I hope you have a fan-flippin-tastic day. Been a long day at work for me, so I think I know what time it is.
Let's go to eat a damn snack.